5028. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. 5028, entitled the Rhode Island Utility Fair Share for Roadway Repair Act, would mandate that when a utility digs up our street, that within a year they not only just put a little patch down the middle, they repair the entire surface. Currently, my district and many districts have had their roadways cannibalized by these utility companies. It has been over a year in 90% of my district where roads have been dug up with that trench down the middle, with that soft temporary patch, and people wonder why our roads are horrendous. The utility companies have a responsibility to repair those roads to the condition that they were in. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I have a letter from the director of the Rhode Island DOT in support of this. Furthermore, he has some technical amendments to the bill, all of which I agree to. And that's it. This is not rocket science. You dig up a street, you repair it to the condition it was in before you dug it up, before you ruin the structural integrity of the street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Representative McNamara. When I was looking at this earlier, a couple of things jumped out at me. One was, it doesn't appear, and I may have missed it, that we are giving any sort of a time limit, like must be completed within. I don't know if that's in there, if I overlooked it. It's far less concerning my next question. So my next question would be, hypothetically, in picture of water mains going down West Shore Road, and you have laterals that run off water mains so they can connect the houses. So when houses connect in, you have that main line running down, and people lateral off. They're literally cutting, maybe the utility would cut, you know, a 2 foot wide by maybe 4 foot long. Right. This bill would require them to go curb to curb. So they're gonna have to replace that road from over here to over here. Without a time limit, that's confusing because they may be doing all of West Shore Road, and that'll take them 3 years. So does that mean they have to do curb to curb every time they do a lateral, and then when they do the neighbors, 3 weeks later, they go and do curb to curb again?
There is a time limit. Within a year, it has to be replaced with a permanent.
Where is that there?
Page 2.
Page 2.
Help me out with the line, Charlie, if you have it.
Complaint for failure to repair it. 1 year. Within 1 year complete.
Okay. Recovery for failure.
And I think a year is ample time. I mean, certainly.
This is talking about pavement. This is not talking about getting the job done. Shall not be paid, if any payment is generally due, shall not be paid within 1 year of the date of determination. This is strictly the state's responsibility to pay. I'm sorry, the contractor's responsibility to pay. This is not from what I can read, and again, I may be really dumb, but it doesn't seem like they have a you must do it by this date or this many days in here. And again, I would be concerned because if you don't have that in there, when you have, I mean, just look at Route 6 from 295 to the Situate line. That road has been ripped up literally every single day and patched every single day, all night, all day for the past 3 years, and the end is not yet in sight. I don't see this as feasible to require, unless we did allow some sort of a time limit within the scope of a project. In other words, this is a 10-year rehab of Route 6, and therefore we will do curb to curb, but for God's sakes, give us some time. You know, that's what I see as a potential problem.
Okay. There are several amendments that have been suggested that deal with the time and permits for construction. One of which is no utility permits will be issued for utility work within a state roadway for a period of 5 years from the time such roadway was last paved by the Rhode Island DOT. So in other words, if it's a new road that was just repaved, and you want to dig it up to replace something, no permit. will be issued. They also have some notification requirements for, emergency situations.
So I would go back to the Warwick example and say you had a water main break. What if the road was just replaced 6 months prior and that water main blew out? Now all that work's gonna have to be done,
For an
the
emergency.
utility's gonna have to go, I don't see that far down here.
Yeah, well, that's the intent, and I believe that it is covered.
I think the way it is right now is we're shifting, or we're seeking to shift fiscal responsibility from DOT to contractors. That'll only drive up the cost to municipalities that have work done, and as written, I don't think this can even stand on its own.
I think what we're trying to do is shift the responsibility for repairing a road that you dig up to the company that digs it up.
Yeah, that's clearly
I
what's
mean,
trying to
it's-
be done.
Thank
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Any other questions of the committee? Chairman, for any issue that you tried to address in the past, not just this committee, but the legislature's tried to address in the past, the fact that province water, I believe, is because they're sovereign, they can't be held accountable under anything that we've drafted in the past. Want to follow that, or have any discussions with them on that, or I'm here today so they can answer that on their own too.
Yeah.
In a little while.
Yeah.
From what I read, that exemption is still intact in this bill.
I'm sorry?
From what I read in this bill, that province water exemption is still intact. The language is 39.1.
I don't know if even we specifically include them in a bill, if it accomplishes anything, because there's
Yeah.
so.
I know in Warwick, we buy Providence water, but it's the Warwick Water Authority that actually does the work. So it's different.
Any other questions of the committee? Thank you very much. Ms.
Mr.
Bob
Chairman.
Docketo from Rhode Island, New Jersey.
Copy for the
Water.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the sponsors of this bill for their hard work and their leadership on it. I think, first of all, there are some comments and technical amendments that we have some of the same comments and concerns that I heard here a little while ago. So we have been working with the representative to incorporate those changes, and hopefully we'll get that done soon. But we think I think it's a great bill, long overdue. It'll ensure that any work that gets done on roadways gets done to a higher standard, and it also holds deficient, work contractors who do deficient work accountable. And it's not always utility companies. There are a lot of utility subcontractors. I don't want to seem like I'm being harsh on the utility companies. Sometimes they pay good money while we work on the performance with a permit, and sometimes it's not that, it's the contractor that is doing that deficient work. So the recommended changes to the proposed legislation that DOT has are sixfold. Real quickly, expands the applicability of the requirements of the utility contractor to beyond public utility to any contractor doing utility work for any type of utility service, whether it's water, sewer, Cape County water, for instance. It establishes a permit requirement and imposes a $500 fine for not getting a permit from DOT. So you would think that people would come to us and get permits. A lot of times now, we catch a lot of people do not take all permits, and if they don't do that, it's very difficult to ensure that what they're doing is being done correctly. It establishes a performance bond requirement on all work. Right now, we just by regulation, or just by policy, we require some big jobs, but I think we need to find a way, a means of addressing quickly. As Representative Chippendale said, we don't want deficient work out there for 2 years. So to skip down to number 6, it would, once we put a contractor on notice, 30 days, if they don't repair that deficient work, we can't have roads in terrible shape for indefinite periods of time. We have to have a definite, finite time limit, and that's 30 days within this reasonable notification. If they don't respond, we go out to the performance bond and do work ourselves, or have the bonding company do the work. Again, it establishes a 5-year moratorium on newly paved roadways. Not to say that they cannot, I think someone said, I think it was Representative that there's always going to be instances where on a new roadway, someone, is there an emergency or someone built a house, we can't tell them to wait 5 years to hook up gas service. So, but this provides we just pave the road, it provides a means, some teeth on how we want basically a full depth reconstruction. We don't want a patch that's going to sag in a few years. We want full depth reconstruction up to curb to curb. Again, if the trunk line is down the middle and it's a lateral to one side of the road, we are not going to require curb to curb. We'll just go half the road or the affected lane. But it gives us the option of going curb to curb if we need to. Sometimes trunk lines are on one side of the road and the lateral goes across the whole roadway. We need to have some teeth to force them to do a full reference on a brand new roadway. And a big note, final note, is there's 1,000 permits a year, 1,000 utility permits a year that of people who actually get permits. There are 1,000 of them. There's a lot of work done without permits. It's impossible for us to be at all those locations, looking over the shoulder, making sure they're conforming to permit requirements or to our standards and specifications. This would establish a means of having them inspected, having someone inspect it, or an independent person. It doesn't, they're not paid to have. They can stay independent. And the way we do it is we go to NPA. And we tell them to select up the NPA, and we'll be the pass-through, whatever it costs, we'll pay, they reimburse us, so we can work out some other type of method. So it's really just about higher standard of work, and just holding people accountable. And so if a contractor, a utility company pays a subcontractor good money to do work, they do a terrible job, who pays for it to repair it? The citizens of Rhode Island, because they're hitting these dips in the road, or these trenches that are failing, and it's wear and tear in the cars. It's tax money for us to repave a road prematurely because it didn't last 20 years. So really, it's just holding people accountable. It's not raising the cost of business. I can tell you the good contractors would all default this because they're being undercut by contractors that are taking shortcuts. So it's just a level playing field and just holding everybody to a level playing field.
And Representative Kazarian.
Eric, I want to thank you for working with Chairman McNamara on this legislation. It's really important. There's so many roads in this province, for example, that just continually get torn up, and I think we can all agree there's nothing worse than a freshly paved road that just 6 months later gets torn up for a new line. And I do agree with what you said too. We have roads in East Providence that, and actually I just contacted DOT about it, that the utility came in, they didn't patch it up properly, and now the state has to come out and pay for it to be patched properly. And one question to you is, would there be a way for the state to fix the road and then we could bill the utility companies for the fix, or does it have to be?
There was some talk about that. So the way we're handling that is if they don't respond, or if they're not 30 days, they're not fixing a problem, we can't have it less than that. We will actually go after their bond and either do the work ourselves or have the bonding company repair the work, and so yeah, there's a means of doing the work correctly if they're not going to step up and fix it efficiently.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Representative Kennedy.
Yes, I also want to compliment you on specifically the one section of the proposed amendment regarding if the road has been repaired, nothing to be done on it within 5 years. There's nothing more frustrating to see potholes or patchwork over a brand new section of pavement. And the fact that I speak, and I saw that Representative McNamara was one of the co-sponsors, kind of westerly, the roads have just been torn up all over the place that have new natural gas pipeline put in, and we don't know when those roads are going to get repaved. I hear from my constituents all the time, and the fact that in some cases we have to file accounts and claims to help these people who've lost an axle, who've ended up having some other major damage done to their vehicle because of the substandard work or the substandard condition that these roads were left in. So I compliment you on some of the proposed changes that Director Alvini has come forth with. It's needed, and I hope that we do something to address this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Darnell.
Has a study done on the cost differential of what it costs to do the whole road as opposed to just doing, let's say, a gutter like they do? Is there any numbers there?
It's significantly more expensive, so we wouldn't require a full reconstruction on a road that's at the end of the service life. We probably would let them patch it if we're scheduled to repave that roadway. It is expensive, but really on like the roadways where they, it's just been paved and they cut across. But no, I know it's easier.
And I'm on board with you. I'd like to know the cost differential.
We'll see if we can get that way.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Frank McMahon, Representative National Grid and Verizon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank McMahon on behalf of National Grid and Verizon. We collectively, I'm going to testify both because they have the same position, so we'll just save time for everybody so you don't have to listen to me twice. So both National Grid and Verizon oppose the bill as it's written. We have not seen the DOT's comments. The ongoing conversation about this type of bill, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, in your remarks, this has been a bill that's been before various and sundry committees throughout the legislature, not just here but on the other side. We constantly get to the same point where we're stuck in this situation where we've got a PUC docket that controls a certain number of cities. We've got city and town ordinances that require us to do 38 or 37, I think 37 communities have different ordinances that relate to the way we're supposed to repair roads. The state roads are the state roads, the town and city and town roads are city and town roads, different rules for different operations. It's National Grid and Verizon's policy to work with the local DPW directors, and in fact there are frequent meetings, monthly meetings, with both the DOT folks as well as the folks in the communities to try to minimize the number of these cuts and these temporary patches that result from these cuts. So the situation that National Grid and Verizon try to invoke is when a city or town is about to embark on repaving or the DOTs embark on repaving, we try to get in there prior to that and do our work and replace those mains or do whatever the situation involves. We try to get that done in advance. So then that new road comes, that road is then paved, and it is part of the process upon which the roads are getting paved in the state of Rhode Island. Where the trouble comes up is in these emergency situations, and that's what I think you're trying to, and I think that's what the chairman is trying to get to, is more of those kinds of situations. And admittedly, in the situation that Chairman McNamara is referring to in his district, there has been some delays because there's been some engineering issues, there's been a variety of issues, and that situation in his district has been taking a little bit longer than it ordinarily should be. So while we understand and appreciate the spirit in which Representative McNamara comes forward, and I know some of you who are longer serving members have expressed concerns about these, and Representative Kazarian, Kennedy, and others, we've been on this committee for a while. Representative Solomon's constantly on my back about particular issues relating to National Grid. So there's lots of issues. This is a very complicated subject. This is not something we think, again, we have not seen the DOT situation, so a lot of what I was concerned about sounds like the DOT comments may have talked about. So I'll take a look at those before we come further and give you, I'm sure we'll have another conversation about this bill going forward. But at this point, in the condition that the bill is in, we're opposed for all those reasons, and there's still many more which I don't want to bore you with. But this is a pretty complicated topic, and again, at the end of the day, at least as far as Verizon and National Grid is concerned, the ratepayers of the state of Rhode Island end up bearing this cost. So this is something we want to be mindful of as we move forward as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
I don't think you have any objection to applying this to state roads. You seem like you're just second, applying for city roads.
We are opposed as the bill is written because we already have 37 to 38 different guidelines to follow. It seems to me that this is a situation that probably speaks to the need for probably having a standard so that, we're a small state. But we're doing, and I know others are going to testify about bond requirements, and one city requires this bond, another city requires this bond. So, as far as we're concerned, we don't really see it as a problem on the DOT roads because they're usually major construction as opposed to these minor things. We don't really have much emergencies on most of the state roads. But most of the stuff we're talking about is happening on the secondary and other roads in the cities and towns. At least that's what we're getting. And quite honestly, we have a really good working relationship with the DPW. And in fact, when this bill first was introduced, the DPWs around the state, we work very closely with them. So we've talked to a lot of DPW directors, some of which have seen this bill, some of which haven't. So there's a lot of folks that I think will have some points about this bill as we move forward.
Thank you, Chairman. Frank, is my concern misplaced relative to the cost from going from repairing to curb?
No, I agree with Mr. Rocchio. The cost is substantial. The difference in cost between a cut that's 4 feet by 4 feet as opposed to going to, I don't know what the width of a typical secondary road is in the state of Rhode Island, but it's substantial. And again, we don't disagree with the issues relative to compaction. There have to be issues that relate to compaction. Compaction just doesn't occur overnight. There are certain engineering standards which you have to adhere to. There's a lot of things to this, but the cost is certainly one of them.
And so as the cost goes up, if were this to be in place and the cost would be being driven up for your clients, and I have no love for either one of your clients, so I'm not doing their bidding. That is a cost of doing business, correct?
It is.
So for National Grid, for example, that will go into their distribution rate increases.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you. Kenneth Booth, Bristol County Water.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ken Booth. I'm the operations manager of Bristol County Water, which serves the towns of Warren, Barrington, and Bristol as water supply. And at this point, we go on record as being opposed to the bill. It had been up historically in the past. A number of concerns, and I hate to say that I've been doing this for a long time. I've worked on the municipal side, so I understand the municipal concerns. I think it comes down to a planning issue. We look forward, we have a lot of infrastructure work to do. As a water utility, we're not a profit agency, we're a non-profit. We work for the same constituents in Oakfield through their water rates. The way this bill is written, it substantially increases our costs, which, to be general, a road project now, approximately 30% of the cost of one of our infrastructure, replacing the 12-inch main down Metcalf Avenue that we did a couple of years ago. 30% of the cost of that whole project is road repair and police repairs. And to jack that up would put off most of the water utilities slow down on the work they're doing. Many of the municipal roads, we have a very good relationship with the Public Works Department. We work together on those. Every municipality gives out a road opening permit. You can put the qualifications in that, what you want that contract to do and what your requirement is. So from my perspective, and I was on that side of the fence, it's a planning issue. Same thing with RIDOT. We argued this years ago from Rhode Island Water Works. Why don't we have a master map of the state and everybody's projected capital work coming up so we can see where it starts to lay out? We've altered our capital plan in the last 5 years. It's not easy for us because when we budget, we're 3 years out on our capital plan. If we use the infrastructure bank to borrow, we have to be in there a year ahead of time to get the plans approved. So what we end up doing is we find out the town of Warren was doing some work. We shifted a plan for 5 years in the future down to do it now. So we didn't have to tear up that road, which was Water Street. Very successful because we're in there once and we move our work. I think if we looked at it from that point of view of the planning side of it, we're making some municipalities do much better than others. But a couple of the road opening permits that everybody can require RIDOT is. You can put the conditions in there, you can inspect. Our interest is to do it right the first time because our constituents, our customers are the same people driving over that pothole. Different from a contractor that's doing something for profit who doesn't have a tie to the community. if this bill needs some type of mediation in it, we go into municipalities where we won't have to put a new water main in, and the road patch, and this happens often, the patch that we put in is the best part of the road that exists. So, in fairness, that road should have been repaired years ago by the municipality. If we see something like that, if this was, we just stay away from that until the town says, oh, we're going to pay that next year. And we will work with the towns. We get a list of the roads that they plan on paving every year. We try to go in and get our work done ahead of time and accelerate it. Unfortunately, in the world we live in election years in particular, in September and October, a whole bunch of roads get paved with like a week's notice. And we might be planning to tear that up the next year and replace them maybe. We get no notice on it. So just in general, from a water system standpoint, it would put us in a very, very difficult position the way it's drafted.
Do you come in the same situation where different municipalities have different standards in repaving?
And I'll say this tactfully, some municipalities are very detailed in how they take care of business and others aren't. Just back and late. But yes, if we're going to have something like this to determine whether you're doing the job right, compaction standards, material standards, most all mirror DOTs because that's the standards. But yeah, we follow those. And if somebody doesn't follow them, then you have them unfairly do the job and pull the bond. We all pull bonds for this work.
Do you find DOT to be the floor or the ceiling when it comes to the standards?
They're the ceiling. I mean, they're the ceiling. That's what we mirror those. They're the rules that we follow. We have no problem following. But to the blanket, to be able to say you have to go curb to curb, huge expense.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Booth? Thank you very much. Carissa Richard, Providence Water.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to comment on this legislation. Providence Water opposes this bill because it would substantially increase road restoration costs for us. Before I just talk about that a little bit, I did want to address the gentleman's question about Providence Water, whether this applies to Providence Water. So Providence Water has legislation that was submitted in 1915, created this, our enabling legislation. And in that legislation, it says that Providence Water is not required to repair the roads in Cranston, North Providence, or Johnston. Now, practically speaking, we have always repaired the roads anywhere in our distribution system for any planned engineering projects, and the state roads as well. There was some legislation about 10 years ago. I know it was submitted several times because while we were doing the temporary patching on our emergency work in Johnston, Cranston, and North Providence, we were not permanently restoring. But at the encouragement of the General Assembly, we did work with Cranston and North Providence, and we put road restoration agreements together with them that we've had. They're both identical, that we pay them what we would normally pay, pay the contractor to do the work, and they take the money and they administer the work themselves. We're still trying to get Johnston to get on board with this, but because of this legislation would affect us. So, we do oppose this, as I said. The majority of our planned and emergency repair work only requires a small portion of the road to be restored. Currently, our restoration costs are about $2.5 million a year, and we estimate that if we did the curb-to-curb restoration for all of our work, it would increase costs by at least $4 million a year. And that's, I'm being told, a low number, just because that doesn't take into account concrete and all of that. We wouldn't be able to absorb these costs, and so we would either have to increase rates or suspend work on necessary infrastructure projects. We follow the restoration standards that were approved in 2008 by the Public Utilities Commission, and those detailed standards do not require curb-to-curb restoration for most of the work that we do. In addition, restoration curb-to-curb, when you do small jobs like hydrant repairs and things like that, would be a big inconvenience. You'd have to close a road for that small type of job. So, given the impact that this legislation would have on our rates and our work, we oppose it.
Any questions? Thank you very much. And Peter Schaefer.
Peter Schaefer, Associate Director, League of Cities and Towns, and obviously we're supportive of this conceptually, and we're here to listen to the testimony too. There are issues with our own public utilities, whether it's Bristol Water or Providence Water, in the one pocket, out the other pocket. We haven't had time to survey all our public works directors on the exact direction they would like to go on this, but conceptually we would support the concept.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on 5028? That will conclude the hearing on that bill.